August 29, 1966. Candlestick Park. During their final concert ever, a 16-year-old girl passed John Lennon a note that made him stop playing Long Tall Sally. Write in the comments. Where are you listening to this story from? And what time is it right now? 25,000 fans couldn't see John's face go white under the stage lights. They couldn't see his hands tremble as he read those 3 sentences written in shaky blue ink. But Paul saw, George saw, and Ringo, from behind his kit, watched John slowly fold the paper and put it in his pocket. This was supposed to be just another show. They hadn't told anyone this would be the Beatles' last concert. The decision had been made in private, kept secret from the world. But somehow, this teenage girl from San Francisco knew. Her note contained details about their future that were impossibly accurate. Details about their breakup, about their solo careers, about December 1980. John looked out at the crowd, then back at his bandmates. The girl had disappeared into the sea of faces, but her message would haunt John for the rest of his life. The note had been passed forward through the crowd, hand to hand, during the opening bars of Long Tall Sally. It was folded into a tiny square. John Lennon Yard. Urgent written on the outside. Security usually intercepted such things. But something about this note was different. The girl who'd started its journey, standing in the general admission section, not even close to the stage, had created a human chain of cooperation. Strangers passed it forward without reading it, as if compelled by something they couldn't explain. When it reached John, he almost tossed it aside. They got hundreds of notes at every concert. Love letters, phone numbers, marriage proposals, death threats. But as his fingers touched the paper, he felt something electric. Not literally, but a sensation that made him stop mid-lyric. Paul covered for him, taking over the vocals, while John unfolded the paper with one hand, still pretending to play guitar with the other. The first sentence made his blood freeze. After tonight, the Beatles will never perform together again. The second sentence was worse. 4 years until the breakup. 14 years until the murder. The third was specific in a way that defied explanation. December 8, 1980, New York, the Dakota. Someone will be waiting. But here's what nobody in that crowd knew. 3 hours earlier, the Beatles had held a meeting in their dressing room. They'd made the decision this would be their last concert. No announcement, no farewell tour, just stop. They were exhausted from 3 years of non-stop touring, tired of not being able to hear themselves play over the screaming, frightened by the death threats and close calls with mob violence. Only their inner circle knew. Manager Brian Epstein, road managers Neil Aspinall and Mal Evans. They'd told no one else. The press release wouldn't go out for weeks. Yet this girl knew, and she knew more than just about the touring ending. She knew about a breakup that none of them could imagine happening. The Beatles were at their peak, about to release Revolver, about to revolutionize studio recording. Breaking up was unthinkable. And murder? Whose murder? When? The date she gave, December 8, 1980, was 14 years in the future. John would be 40 years old. It seemed impossibly far away. John's hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold his guitar pick. The Rickenbacker felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He looked across the stage at Paul, who was staring at him with concern. George had noticed too, moving closer, ready to cover if John collapsed. They'd seen John handle hecklers, equipment failures, even riots, but they'd never seen him look terrified. The girl who'd written the note was named Rebecca Sullivan, 16 years old, from Haight-Ashbury, the San Francisco neighborhood that would soon become the center of the hippie movement. She wasn't a typical Beatles fan. No screaming, no crying, no signs declaring her love. She'd stood perfectly still in the crowd, wearing a simple black dress, her long dark hair covering half her face. When John read her note, she was already walking toward the exit. "Stop," What happened next will give you chills. John handed his guitar to a confused roadie and walked to Paul's microphone. The band stopped playing. Long Tall Sally, dying mid-chorus. 25,000 fans fell silent, confused. Was someone hurt? Was there a problem? In 1966, the Beatles stopping mid-song was unheard of. "I need to find someone in the crowd," John said into the microphone, his voice carrying across the baseball stadium. "A girl who passed me a note. Dark hair, black dress, probably heading for the exit. Please, if you're still here, come to the stage." Paul grabbed John's arm. "What are you doing?" "We've got a show to finish." John showed him the note. Paul's face went pale. He showed it to George, who immediately set down his guitar. Ringo, unable to see from behind his kit, stood up and walked over. When he read it, he sat down hard on the stage floor. "This is impossible," George said. "How could anyone know we decided to stop touring? We just decided 3 hours ago." But the crowd was already parting, creating a pathway. Rebecca Sullivan was walking back toward the stage, moving with an otherworldly calm through 25,000 confused fans. Security moved to intercept her, but John shouted into the microphone, "Let her through, nobody touch her." The journey from the exit to the stage took 5 minutes. 5 minutes of complete silence in Candlestick Park, as thousands watched a teenage girl walk through their midst like Moses parting the Red Sea. When she reached the stage barrier, she looked up at John with eyes that seemed ancient despite her young face. "How do you know?" John asked, not even bothering with the microphone now. His voice, raw and desperate, still carried in the silence. Rebecca's answer was simple. "My mother. She sees things. She's been seeing the Beatles' future since 1964. She saw this concert. She saw what comes after. She made me promise to warn you." But the most shocking part was yet to come. Brian Epstein had rushed on stage, furious at the interruption. "John, we need to continue. There are contracts, obligations." John cut him off. "Brian, read this." He handed over the note. Brian's reaction was immediate and visceral. He staggered backward, his hand over his heart. "This mentions things, private things, board meetings from this morning." Rebecca spoke again, her voice carrying despite its softness. "Mr. Epstein, you have 1 year left. August 27, 1967. An overdose in London. It will look accidental, but you'll mean to do it. The pressure of keeping the Beatles together while they grow apart will break you." Brian Epstein, one of the most powerful men in music, fell to his knees on the stage of Candlestick Park. The crowd gasped. Photographers were going crazy, flashbulbs exploding like fireworks. This was no longer a concert. It was something else, something unprecedented. Paul stepped forward, always the diplomat. "Miss, I don't know who you are, or how you think you know these things, but you're scaring people. Maybe we should discuss this privately." Rebecca turned to Paul. "James Paul McCartney, you'll announce your departure from the Beatles on April 10, 1970, though you'll keep it secret for months. You'll marry Linda Eastman on March 12, 1969. She'll die of breast cancer on April 17, 1998. You'll find love again with Heather Mills, but it won't last. Then Nancy Shevell will heal your heart." Paul's legs buckled. George caught him, holding him upright. The crowd was murmuring now, a low rumble of confusion and fear. Someone shouted, "Which?" Others were crying. The atmosphere in Candlestick Park had shifted from concert excitement to something darker, more primal. Here's the detail that changes everything. Rebecca reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook, worn and filled with handwritten pages. "My mother has been documenting her visions since 1947. She saw the Beatles before you existed. She saw 4 boys from Liverpool who would change the world. But she also saw the price you'd pay. John, she saw your death most clearly. John found his voice. If you know when and where I die, I can avoid it. Change it. Rebecca shook her head sadly. That's not how it works. Mom tried to prevent things she saw. It only makes them happen differently, usually worse. The future is like a river. You can dam it, divert it, but it finds its way. She opened the notebook, flipping to a specific page. December 8th, 1980. You'll be returning to the Dakota Building in New York with your wife Yoko. Yes, you'll leave Cynthia and marry an artist named Yoko Ono. A man named Mark will be waiting. He'll have a copy of your new album for you to sign. You'll sign it. Then, when you come back later that night, he'll be waiting again. John was shaking now, visibly trembling. Mark who? What's his last name? If I tell you, you'll try to find him first. That could make things worse. But John, Rebecca's voice broke for the first time. Your death will matter. It will end an era but also preserve it. The Beatles will become immortal because they'll never have the chance to become ordinary. You haven't heard the darkest part yet. George, who'd been silent, finally spoke. What about me? What happens to me? Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. November 29th, 2001. Los Angeles. Lung cancer that spreads to your brain. You'll die in Paul's arms, with Ringo holding your hand. Your last words will be love one another. George sat down on the stage, his sitar beside him. He looked at peace, almost serene. That's actually beautiful. To die surrounded by love. Speaking of love. Ringo stepped forward. And me? Am I the last? You and Paul will carry on for decades. You'll tour, make albums, keep the music alive. Ringo, you'll have health scares but survive them all. Paul, you'll become Sir Paul, a knight of the British Empire. You'll both live to see the Beatles' music reach generations not yet born. The crowd was in chaos now. Some were leaving, frightened. Others pressed closer, desperate to hear more. The security team didn't know what to do. The promoter, Tom Donahue, was screaming into a phone, trying to figure out how to handle this unprecedented situation. This is the moment that would haunt all four Beatles. John walked to the edge of the stage and sat down, his legs dangling over. He looked directly at Rebecca. Why tell us if we can't change it? Why burden us with knowing? Rebecca's mother had appeared at her side. When had she arrived? She was older, maybe 50, with the same dark hair streaked with gray, the same ancient eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried despite no microphone. Because you need to know that everything you're about to create matters. The songs you haven't written yet. Imagine, Let It Be, Here Comes the Sun. Maybe I'm Amazed. They'll save lives. They'll end wars in people's hearts. You need to know that the pain coming is worth enduring. She pulled out photographs, impossible photographs. The Beatles in the studio, recording songs they hadn't written yet. John with a woman they'd never seen, presumably Yoko. Paul with a blonde woman, Linda. George with long hair and a beard, looking like a mystic. Ringo in a tuxedo accepting some award. These are from my visions, she explained. I draw what I see. I've been drawing the Beatles' future for 6 years. Paul stood up, anger replacing his shock. This is a trick. Someone's playing an elaborate prank. Hidden cameras, actors, something. This isn't real. Rebecca's mother smiled sadly. Paul, your mother Mary died when you were 14. She comes to you in dreams. The song you'll write about her, Let It Be, will comfort millions. She wants you to know she's proud. She's always with you. Paul broke, completely broke. He fell to his knees on the stage of Candlestick Park and sobbed. John crawled over to him, holding his friend, his partner, his brother. George and Ringo joined them. The four Beatles, in front of 25,000 people, held each other and cried. What happened next stunned even the skeptics. The crowd began to sing, without prompting, without instruments. 25,000 voices began singing Yesterday, the song that had made the Beatles more than just a rock band, that had proven they could create art. The harmonies were perfect, as if conducted by an invisible hand. Even the people leaving stopped and sang. Rebecca and her mother stood at the barrier, watching. Then Rebecca said something that would later prove to be the most accurate prediction of all. This moment, the Beatles crying on stage while thousands sing Yesterday, will never be photographed. Every camera here will malfunction. The film will be destroyed by an unexplained magnetic field. This moment will exist only in memory, becoming legend. And she was right. Despite dozens of photographers present, not a single photo survived from those crucial minutes. The film was all damaged, overexposed, corrupted, destroyed. The only evidence would be 25,000 witnesses, each with their own version of what they saw. John stood up first, pulling the others with him. He walked back to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed tonight, I can't explain it. I don't understand it, but I believe it. And if what we've been told is true, then this is goodbye. The Beatles won't be touring anymore after tonight. The crowd erupted, not in anger, but in grief. The screaming wasn't fan hysteria, it was mourning. They were watching the Beatles die as a live act, even as the band still stood before them. But here's what nobody expected to happen. George picked up his guitar. If this is the end, let's make it count. He started playing Roll Over Beethoven, one of their old Hamburg numbers, raw and aggressive. John joined in, then Paul, then Ringo. For the next hour, the Beatles played like they were back in the Cavern Club, like they were hungry kids trying to make it, not the biggest band in the world. They played every song they could remember. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Carl Perkins, their own hits, deep album cuts, songs they'd never performed live before. John sang until his voice was gone. Then Paul took over. Then George. Even Ringo sang. They switched instruments. Paul on drums, Ringo on bass, John on piano, George on everything else. The crowd danced, cried, sang along. Rebecca and her mother stayed at the barrier, watching with those knowing eyes. At one point, John came over to them, between songs. The man who kills me, will he be here tonight? Rebecca's mother nodded. He's in the crowd, row 47, but he doesn't know it yet. Right now, he's just a fan. He loves you. That's what will make it so terrible. He'll kill what he loves most. John looked out at the crowd, trying to see row 47, but it was too far, too dark. Somewhere out there was his future killer, singing along, loving the Beatles. The thought was paralyzing. The truth about what happened after the concert. The Beatles played until 10 p.m., when the stadium literally turned off the power. They'd gone an hour over their scheduled time. As the lights went out, John shouted into the dead microphone, "Thank you, San Francisco. Thank you, America. Thank you, world." The Beatles are finished touring, but were not finished creating. They ran off stage to the armored car, waiting to take them to the airport. But John stopped, ran back, and found Rebecca and her mother still at the barrier. "The notebook," he said. "Can I have it?" Rebecca's mother shook her head. "If you read it all, you'll go mad." But she tore out one page and handed it to him. "This is the most important thing. Read it when you're ready." John took the page without looking at it, shoving it in his pocket with Rebecca's original note. He wouldn't read it for 3 years, and when he did, it would change everything about how he approached his final decade. In the car to the airport, the Beatles were silent. Finally, Ringo spoke. "Do you believe it? All of it?" George answered first. "Yes. I've always believed in fate, karma, the cosmic plan. This just confirms it." Paul was skeptical. Mass hypnosis. Clever cold reading? Lucky guesses. But John was certain. She knew about the meeting. She knew we decided to stop touring. She knew things nobody could know. I believe it, and I'm terrified. Brian Epstein, riding with them, was gray-faced, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 1 hour. If what she said about me is true, I have less than a year. Brian would die on August 27, 1967, exactly as Rebecca had predicted. What the page John took really said. In 1969, John finally read the page Rebecca's mother had given him. It didn't predict events. It was a message, seemingly from his future self. John, if you're reading this, it means the prophecy has begun to unfold. You can't change your fate, but you can change its meaning. Every song you write from now on matters. Imagine will become an anthem for peace. Jealous Guy will help men express vulnerability. Beautiful Boy will capture father-son love forever. Write them all. Record everything. Leave nothing unfinished. Your death will be senseless, but your life can be sensational. Choose love, even when it leads to Yoko, and the world hates you for it. Choose honesty, even when it alienates you from Paul. Choose peace, even when rage would be easier. You have 11 years from the time you read this. Make them count. The universe or Rebecca's mom, whichever you prefer. John carried that page until December 8, 1980. It was in his pocket when Mark David Chapman shot him. Yoko found it, blood-stained, and kept it secret for 20 years before revealing its existence, though not its contents, in a 2000 interview. The aftermath that changed rock history. The Beatles never toured again after Candlestick Park. They became a studio band, creating Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, The White Album, Abbey Road, and Let It Be. The prophecy had freed them from the obligation to perform live, allowing them to push the boundaries of what rock music could be. Rebecca Sullivan disappeared after that night. No one could find her or her mother. The house they'd supposedly lived in didn't exist. The school Rebecca claimed to attend had no record of her. It was as if they'd materialized just for that concert, delivered their message, and vanished. But there were traces. Other people came forward claiming Rebecca's mother had predicted things for them. Always accurate, always unsettling. A woman in Los Angeles said she'd been told about the Manson murders a year before they happened. A man in Portland claimed she'd predicted Mount St. Helens erupting, but Rebecca and her mother were never found. In 1970, when the Beatles officially broke up, Paul was asked about Candlestick Park. Something happened that night that I still can't explain. A girl knew things she couldn't know, whether it was supernatural or an elaborate hoax. It marked the end of one Beatles era and the beginning of another. George, always the most mystical, fully embraced the prophecy. His solo work became increasingly spiritual, influenced by the knowledge of his own mortality. Knowing when you'll die is liberating, he said in 1999. It removes the fear. I know I have until November 2001. Every day until then is a gift. George died on November 29, 2001, exactly as predicted. The detail that confirms everything. In 2010, a janitor cleaning out an old storage area at Candlestick Park before it was demolished found something extraordinary. A box hidden in the walls, sealed since 1966. Inside was a tape recorder and a note, "Do not open until all 4 Beatles have passed." The janitor, ignoring the instruction, played the tape. It was a recording of the entire Candlestick Park concert, including the prophecy, Rebecca's predictions, everything. But the tape was impossible. The quality was too good for 1966 technology, and it included conversations that happened off microphone, private whispers between the Beatles that no recording equipment could have captured. The tape is now in a private collection. Its authenticity debated, but those who've heard it say it's chilling. You can hear John's heartbeat accelerate When he reads the note, Paul's breathing stops. When Rebecca mentions Linda's death, George's peaceful acceptance of his fate, Ringo's nervous drumming of his fingers, John's final connection to the prophecy. On December 8, 1980, John gave his last interview to RKO Radio. At the end, the interviewer asked an offhand question: "Do you believe in fate?" John's answer was his last recorded words before his death. "I met a girl in San Francisco in 1966 who told me exactly when and where I would die. I've spent 14 years wondering if she was right. In a few hours when I walk home to the Dakota, I'll find out. But you know what? I'm not afraid anymore. I've had 14 years to make peace with it. I've created Imagine. I've loved Yoko. I've raised Sean. If tonight's the night, then I'm ready. The music will live forever. That's all that matters." 3 hours later, Mark David Chapman was waiting outside the Dakota. Just as Rebecca had predicted, John signed an album for him at 5 p.m. At 10:50 p.m., when John returned, Chapman shot him 4 times. John died at 11:07 p.m. at Roosevelt Hospital. The impossible evidence discovered in 2016. On the 50th anniversary of the Candlestick Park concert, something extraordinary was found in the demolished stadium's grounds. Construction workers discovered a time capsule that shouldn't have existed. Candlestick Park didn't bury time capsules. Inside was a letter dated August 29, 1966, in Rebecca Sullivan's handwriting. "To whoever finds this, the Beatles played their last concert tonight. I told them their futures. They think I'm psychic, but I'm not. I'm something else. Something that doesn't have a word yet. I exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. In one timeline, the Beatles toured until 1969 and broke up bitterly. In another, John wasn't shot, and the Beatles reunited in 1981. But in this timeline, the one you're living in, the Beatles stopped touring tonight and created their greatest music in the studio. This is the timeline where their music matters most, helps the most people, changes the most lives. I helped ensure this timeline survived. The Beatles had to know their fate to fulfill it. John had to know about December 8th to make his final years count. Paul had to know about Linda to cherish their time together. George had to know about November 2001 to complete his spiritual journey. Ringo had to know he'd survive to become the keeper of their legacy. I'm not proud of burdening them with this knowledge, but it was necessary. The Beatles' music saves exactly 47,293 people from suicide between 1966 and 2050. That's why I did it. Rebecca Sullivan, or whatever name you need me to have." The letter was authenticated. The paper was from 1966. The ink aged correctly, but Rebecca Sullivan still couldn't be found in any records. She remains a ghost, a phantom, a maybe fiction that 4 Beatles swore was real. What Paul and Ringo know but won't say. In 2020, during COVID lockdown, Paul and Ringo did a Zoom call that was accidentally recorded by an assistant. In it, they discussed Candlestick Park. Paul: "Do you ever wonder if she was real, Rebecca?" Ringo: "John believed it. That's all that mattered." Paul: "But she knew things. Linda's death date, Ringo and George's, and Brian's." Paul: "Sometimes I dream about her. She's always 16, always in that black dress." Ringo: "John said he saw her once more, in 1980 outside the Dakota trying to warn him." Paul: "Why didn't he listen?" Ringo: "Because he'd made peace with it. He said the prophecy wasn't a warning, it was permission to stop running." The recording was deleted, but the transcript leaked. Paul and Ringo have never acknowledged it. The final mystery of Candlestick Park. Every year on August 29th, someone leaves flowers at the site where Candlestick Park stood. The cards are always the same. For John, who knew. For George, who accepted. For Paul, who doubted. For Ringo, who endured. The timeline is secure. RS. Security cameras have never caught who leaves them. The flowers appear between 3:17 a.m. and 3:18 a.m. exactly 1 minute. They're always white roses, John's favorite, marigolds, George's favorite, red roses, Paul's favorite, and daisies, Ringo's favorite. And they're always fresh, even though those flowers don't bloom together naturally. In 2021, Paul visited the site on August 29th for the first time. He found the flowers and left his own note. Rebecca, if you're real, if you're reading this, thank you. The burden of knowing was heavy, but it made us better. It made our music matter more. John faced December 8th with courage because of you. George faced November 29th with peace because of you. And I've lived every day knowing it could be my last, which has made every day precious, Paul. The next morning, Paul found a response under his hotel door. The music continues. The timeline is preserved. Your legacy is safe. John and George send their love. R.S. Paul has never spoken about this publicly, but those close to him say he carries that note everywhere. Proof that something extraordinary happened at Candlestick Park. Something that transcended music, time, and even death. That's the story of August 29th, 1966. The night the Beatles received a prophecy that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The night a 16-year-old girl named Rebecca Sullivan, who may or may not have existed, told them their futures with impossible accuracy. The night 25,000 fans witnessed the Beatles' last concert without knowing they were watching history end and legend begin. The music continues. John and George are gone. Exactly when and how Rebecca predicted. Paul and Ringo survive, carrying the weight of knowing, the burden of being the last. But they also carry the music, the legacy, the proof that sometimes the universe reveals its plans to those who need to know. And somewhere, somewhen, Rebecca Sullivan, 16 forever, dressed in black, carrying a notebook full of futures, watches over the timeline she helped preserve, ensuring the Beatles' music continues to save those 47,293 lives, one song at a time.